This idea about language, whether the French language could be used in different distinctions, which something, by the way,
because of the fact that 25% of the Canadian population is Francophone, but not only that.
The trade fight between the U.S. and Canada heating up, including a social media post this morning from President Trump threatening to rename Lake Ontario Lake America. Joining us right now is Dominic LeBlanc. He's a Canadian minister responsible for Canada-U.S. trade, intergovernmental affairs, and One Canadian economy. Good morning to you.
Hi, good morning.
We could start with the Truth Social post. What's your reaction to that?
So we've decided as a federal government months ago not to respond to sort of the daily social media posts of either the president or his cabinet secretaries and so on. We're focused on doing what we can in Canada to build our economy and to having a constructive relationship with the government of the United States, our most important trading partner. So I, like many of your viewers, saw the different posts yesterday, including from some Canadian premiers who would be the equivalent of your state governors. But honestly, my focus and the Prime Minister's focus is to build a Canadian economy the best way we can. We think a strong Canadian economy is a valuable partner in North American competitiveness. So we're going to continue to do that. And I'm not trying to duck your question, but we have deliberately not responded as a federal government to some of the stuff that on our side or your side of the border.
Dominic, help us understand, and we don't need to relitigate it, but I think we all want to understand what went wrong as you see it during those talks. There's been a lot of efforts, even in the past 72 hours, to try to reconstruct what went wrong, and I still don't think that there's an agreement either on either side about what is the sticking point here.
So, and you're right, that's a question that, again, on both sides of the border, I think gets a lot of interest. President Trump, at the end of July, had threatened 50% tariffs on about 28 billion Canadian dollars of exports to the United States. That would have been 40 to 50,000 jobs in our country put at risk. This is in addition to the sectoral tariffs, the 232 tariffs in steel, aluminum, automobiles, in our case, softwood lumber. So what that did is it prompted a new round of negotiations, an intensity of negotiations. I have a constructive and frankly, I think an effective relationship with Ambassador Greer, the U.S. trade representative. He has been at all times a professional, accessible. I think he's acted in good faith, as have we. So he and I began with our colleagues a process of negotiation. And President Trump on Wednesday extended the deadline 3 days, saying that he believed they had a deal with Canada. We were more careful. We said we're close to a deal. We're making real progress. And on Friday night, at the deadline the president set, Prime Minister Carney was unable to conclude that in totality we had what we thought was a deal before us that would have been in the economic interest of the country. Canada's in a different economic position than other trading partners, the most important customer of the United States, but the most integrated in supply chains, particularly in these sectors.
The thing we're trying to understand here is you're saying you have a great relationship with Ambassador Greer. We've read stories about some daylight between Greer and Lutnick coming in later in the process, and whether that was the issue, whether there was a misunderstanding about what these auto tariffs were, and whether they would also include semi-trucks and other kinds of trucks, and what that would mean
medium
for
and heavy-duty trucks.
This idea about language, whether the French language could be used in different distinctions, which something, by the way, Jamieson Greer says he's never even heard of, but it appears that Mark Carney seemed to allude to. Explain it to us if you can.
Yeah, so those are examples, I think good examples. The Prime Minister used them at a news conference on Saturday in Ottawa, of where in those final hours last Friday evening, we concluded there was a gap that made the deal impossible. So the automotive industry in Canada, highly integrated with the United States, the parts industry, this is an example over decades of that integration. We had always been, in our discussions with the Americans, recognizing that President Trump has redesigned his trading relationships with all of the partners in the world, including Canada. We started from the USMCA position of zero tariffs. Then the president brought in a series of tariffs in these sectors. We accepted that no country was going to trade tariff-free with the United States. That's a significant departure for us. But because of that integration and because of the North American competitiveness, we wanted to end up in the best situation of all the trading partners, particularly in the auto sector. So to use that example, Canadian automotive production is cars, but there's a very significant production of medium and heavy-duty trucks from Ford and GM that are exported to the United States. So if we were negotiating with Ambassador Greer in good faith to reduce the tariffs on autos, we had always been clear, certainly from our side, that it had to include these medium and heavy-duty trucks. Otherwise, the Prime Minister would have been in an untenable position of agreeing to an automotive deal that would have left very significant present and future production outside this tariff advantage. That's one example. The question around language, we had agreed to remove the taxes. We got rid of the digital services tax, as President Trump was requiring, and we reduced the payments or the taxes that would have applied to American streamers. Think of Netflix. But in Canadian law, we have always had, because of the fact that 25% of the Canadian population is Francophone, but not only that, to be able to promote Canadian culture, Canadian stories, Canadian artists, there were requirements around discoverability and visibility. So on these platforms, Canadian content, including French language content, would be accessible. We had always said in our discussions that those for us were not part of the negotiation, those requirements around discoverability, but the financial aspects, the payments, had been resolved. So those are two examples in a frankly, a basket of probably half a dozen, where at the end, we didn't think we had arrived at an agreement that was in the economic interests of Canada. That's why on Friday evening, the negotiations weren't able to conclude positively.
Okay. Dominic, we got to leave it there.
We just asked, will there be retaliatory tariffs announced today?
I think that's the government intention. It's something Mr. Trump would have done exactly the same thing. He wouldn't let key industries, critical industries in his economy face a completely uneven trading circumstance. So the Prime Minister will be in, and we made this very clear. It shouldn't surprise anybody, our friends in the American administration. We said that if we didn't get to a deal, we would have to take the steps that any responsible government would take to protect those sectors of the economy. Our preference was not to do that. Our preference was to find a deal that benefits both countries. We still believe that's possible, but in the meantime, we're not waiting by the phone. We're going to do the work that's necessary to protect our own economy.
Okay. Dominic, I want to thank you for joining us this morning. Appreciate it.